In this video, we are going to see how to add a Java Server Faces or JSF profile to an existing dynamic web project in Eclipse. So I have my dynamic web project, and why do I want to add faces to it? Well, Java Server Faces or JSF is a way that we can essentially write a Java class, and we can exhibit some of the attributes of that class in our web pages. In other words, it's a way we can make our website or our web application dynamic by calling into Java code when needed to perform some additional logic. JSF also has a UI library, and there are several add-on libraries as well, like Prime Faces, which has a lot of nice UI components. So you might say, well gosh, I know of a better way to do UI, I like to do React, and I do this stuff. You can still do all that stuff. You don't have to, but this is a way to write a Java class and have that Java class have some effect on the website that you're building or on the user interface that you're building through your website. So to add it, we right-click on Plant Places, the project rather, which I call Plant Places. I choose Properties, and I'm going to select Project Facets. Now, one thing I want to show before I forget is take a look at the web.xml as we have it right now. So this is the default web.xml that we get in a dynamic web project in Eclipse. And by the way, dynamic web project means we can have HTML, CSS, JavaScript, and we can have Java classes as well. So it gives us both the staticness of HTML along with the dynamicness of having compiled files. So what I need to do now is select the Java Server Faces button, and let's take a look at the versions that are available. 2.2 looks great. Requires dynamic web module 2.5 or greater. We set that up when we initially configured our project. So that looks good. Now what's important here is notice this further configuration required option. We select this, and this can get a little bit tricky here. JSF type, we say user library. I'm going to hit download, and I'm going to select this, and I'm going to choose next. I accept the terms of this license. Okay. And finish, after of course reading it, and we get, zip file is empty. Now I will say that's moderately annoying, but it's an issue that I saw in earlier versions of Eclipse. Kind of hoped it would have been fixed in this version, but essentially what happened, the URL where it's going to download this library, the URL changed, the libraries are no longer available for download there, and instead of telling you that, it just says zip file is empty. So, okay. There are two ways to fix this. One is to download the files that we need manually. There are only two files. One of them is this JSF impl 229 jar, and the other one is this JSF API 229 jar. Just those files which end in jar, the two that I've pointed out, none of the others. And I'll put these links in the URL for or in the comments for the video. The other option we have is just to say disable library configuration and then come clean it up later some other way. And that's exactly what we're going to do, because we're soon going to make this a Maven project, and we can simply add a dependency for these libraries in our Maven file. If you don't know what Maven is yet, don't worry, we'll cover that in a future video. But nonetheless, we still get value out of walking through this wizard because it's going to create the configuration for us for faces. It's going to create a faces config file, which is the faces configuration file naturally, and it's also going to enhance our web.xml. So with this, I choose OK, and I choose Apply and Close. We let it think for a little bit, and now take a look at this. Do you see that our web.xml has changed? And also we have a new file called faces config.xml, and this is where we can put things like our navigation rules, manage beans, and things like that. So at this point, it has given us the configuration for faces. Okay, wonderful. One thing I'm going to do that's generally a good idea here is I'm going to have a special file extension for faces. This isn't required, but a good idea. I'll make that XHTML just like so. So the welcome file list that you see here in web.xml is saying if the user goes to our website and simply goes to our domain name without entering an actual page, what's the order of pages that we're going to look for? So in other words, 127.001.8080 Plant Places, notice it says welcome to our first page. When I say index.html, we get the same thing because index.html is in our welcome file list. So if we don't specify a file, it's going to go ahead and find index.html on our path, which is right here, and that's what it's going to use. It's going to go in this order, and it's going to use the first file that it finds. So index.html we put at the top. Now we want to route any file that ends with XHTML into faces. Just makes it a little bit cleaner. Now this is faces right here. This is what we need for faces. And this is a mapping that says anytime we have a directory in our URI or URL that has faces, redirect it to this faces servlet. That works great, no problem. So in other words, I could say plant places / faces / index.html, and it's going to pass it off to Java Server Faces to process this file index.html. I haven't restarted and I haven't finished my configuration, so naturally we got an error there. So that works out well. The only trick is we get a bit of a longer URL here because we have to include this directory faces. And I want to make it easier so that we don't have to include that directory. We just have to use the extension XHTML. And indeed, that's easy enough to do. I simply duplicate the servlet mapping and tidy up just a little bit here. And what I do is the URL pattern is just, it says if a URL contains this pattern, reroute it to the servlet name faces servlet. The servlet name faces servlet is managed by this class here. So what I'll do is I'll say star.xhtml, and that means any file that ends with XHTML we're going to pass off to this thing called the faces servlet, and we're going to have that do our processing. So let me go ahead and rename our existing HTML file into an XHTML file, and OK, and save. And now we'll redeploy. To redeploy, simply go down to the Servers tab. If this doesn't show up for you, you can go to Show View and choose Servers, or you might need to change your perspective based on where you are. Notice mine says Debugging Restart, and so what I'm going to do is simply stop and give it just a moment, and then click the bug again. Yeah, okay, let's go ahead and save this, and it should restart in just a moment. Sure enough, it restarts, and now I'm going to refresh this page. And we get an error. It says requested resources not available. So let's go back and take a look. Everything's running, right? So we go to our console and let's see what we have. Oh, look at this. Class not found exception, javax.faces.webapp.faces servlet. That's that library that we're missing that I mentioned earlier. So to fix this, we need to convert our project to a Maven project. I did say I'd do this in a future video, but looks like I have a bit of time to do it now, so let's go ahead and do it. I'm going to go to Configure, and I'm going to say Convert to Maven Project. Give this just a moment. Now, we will get into more details about Maven in a later video, but Maven is a way that we can build our projects in Java. Maven's an option, Gradle's another option, Ant is another option, Javac is yet another. So don't worry about what all of this says just yet. We will explain what that means. I'll give you the quick version right here, which simply means that when we compile this into an artifact is essentially a series of compiled files and files that do not compile. When we compile it to an artifact, it's going to be compiled to a file that ends in war. Our other options are, well, just war. And it's going to be called plant places, and this is the version that we're going to use. So I go ahead and I choose finish, and this is going to add something called pom.xml. pom.xml is a list of all our dependent libraries. So what we can do is we can simply put the JSF libraries in here. We are going to need a little snippet of XML, but that XML is very easy to find. So we just need to enhance this file and say, here's the XML. Yeah, here's the library that we need. Just do a quick search for JSF 229 Maven, and generally in the first couple of results, you'll see some options. As a matter of fact, here you see there's actually a much newer version, 2218. Kind of like that. So I click on 2218, and you see copy to clipboard. That looks good. And so now I'm going to go down to my Maven file, and I need to add a new section for dependencies. So I'm going to say, okay, dependencies, and enter. And let me put this in high def so we can see it a little easier on the video. Within this dependencies section, I simply paste what I had before, that single dependency. Probably a good idea to do a little tabbing here to make it a little bit nicer. I do wonder, that's the JSF impl. What I'm wondering is we probably also need the JSF API. So just a moment. So we'll say JSF API. Okay, and here we go. And hopefully we'll find a compatible version like around that 228. Okay, sure enough, there we go, 2218. And there we go, JSF API, and copy to clipboard. Okay, looking good. And go back to Eclipse, and I'm going to paste the dependency in here. Notice very carefully that we have a plural tag called dependencies, and then within that we have a set of singular tags called dependency. So we want to keep all of these dependency tags within the dependencies plural set. One issue that I see a lot when people are working through this is they'll just copy the dependency at the bottom of the file, or they'll copy it somewhere else, and Maven doesn't know to look for it there. So be very careful where you put these dependencies. So we have our dependencies. Now I right click and I say Maven. Note we have a new option here. Maven update project. That tells it to go out and fetch any dependencies that it has not already fetched. Now I can do that update once again, but look very closely here at debugging and synchronized. Watch that word synchronized as I right click and I choose Maven and then update. You'll notice that it flashes to restart or republish and then immediately goes back to synchronized. Essentially it did a little hot swap there and it said, okay, now I have the libraries, now we can go again. So let me go back to that error page that we got just a moment ago and refresh, and we might not get a working version yet, but if we get at least a different error, we are in good shape. So I refresh, and sure enough, we get a 500. The 500 is just being a little particular about our HTML syntax, but you notice we're no longer getting that 404, and that's because the JSF servlet is able to process this page or parse this page because we have downloaded those libraries. So happy path, let's see if we can get this to work. It said it wasn't very happy about having an unclosed meta tag, and sure enough it is correct. The meta tag here is an open XML tag, but it is not closed. So let's add a slash to self-close it. Let's confirm that everything else looks good, and it does. Certainly quite a bit more we need to do with this page over time, but right now we just want a proof of concept. So I refresh, and welcome to our first page. Sure enough, we're looking really good. So that's a look at how we can set up and integrate JSF in an existing dynamic web project and also add Maven and download those libraries a lot easier than having to do it the manual way, and also get some automatic configuration around our web.xml that was added to us, added by Eclipse, and also this file called facesconfig. So much more to come here over the next series of videos, but nonetheless, this will get us off to a good start. Thank you.